Stop right there. Why are you stealing what does not belong to you? Return it. Immediately.
Little black boy catches racist flight attendant stealing. What happens next will shock you. You need to return what you took. Right now. Those words hit the cabin like a thunderclap. Not loud. Not hysterical. But absolutely, unmistakably certain. The kind of certain that doesn't leave room for argument. The kind of certain that assumes it has already won. Marcus Carter looked up from his seat slowly. The way a man looks up when he has been accused of something so far outside reality that his first instinct is not anger, but genuine confusion. The pure, unprocessed confusion of a person trying to locate which universe he has accidentally stepped into. I'm sorry. You heard me. Claire Whitmore stood in the aisle of first class at 32,000 feet with her hands clasped in front of her, and that smile, that carefully maintained, professionally installed smile, sitting on her face like a piece of furniture that had been placed in a room where it didn't belong. The item that was in the overhead compartment above your seat is missing, and I need you to return it. Marcus stared at her. Around them, the first-class cabin had gone very, very still. The particular stillness of people who are pretending not to listen while listening with every cell in their bodies. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus said. His voice was controlled, measured. The voice of a man who has learned, at significant personal cost, that staying calm in moments like this is not optional. I haven't taken anything. Sir. I haven't touched anything that isn't mine. A pause. Claire's smile didn't move. That was the thing about it. It was completely independent of whatever was happening behind her eyes. A mask that had been worn so long it had forgotten it was a mask. I'm going to need to search your bag, she said. And from the window seat beside Marcus, from the small body tucked against the armrest with his knees pulled up and his eyes taking in absolutely everything, 8-year-old Ethan Carter watched his father's jaw tighten and thought, something is very wrong here. He reached up slowly and adjusted his glasses. And the tiny light on the left temple, the one nobody ever noticed, blinked once in the recycled cabin air. Recording. For hours earlier, Marcus Carter had stood at Gate 22 of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Clean, uncomplicated, almost childlike hope. The kind that sits in your chest like something warm. He stood there in his good jacket, the charcoal one he saved for important occasions, with his carry-on beside him and his son's small hand in his, looking out at the tarmac and the planes gleaming in the early morning Georgia sun, and he let himself feel it. He had earned it. Every late night, every skipped dinner, every weekend he'd worked when he should have been resting, it had accumulated into this moment. Gate 22. 2 first-class tickets to Los Angeles. A promise kept to his son. Ethan had been asking about airplanes since he was 4 years old. Not in the way kids ask about things they've seen in picture books. In the specific, technical, almost obsessive way that Ethan asked about everything that caught his attention, which was most things. How do they stay up? How heavy are they? How many parts does an engine have? What does it feel like when the wheels leave the ground? Marcus had answered every question. He always answered every question. That was the thing about Ethan. The questions were never really about the subject. They were about the world, about how things worked, about why things were the way they were. Ethan was 8 years old, and he had the inner life of someone who had been paying careful attention to the world for much, much longer than 8 years. Marcus understood this because he had been the same kind of child. He was 34 now. He worked as a tech consultant, had built his career from the ground up with the same patient, methodical energy his son had inherited, starting in IT support straight out of college, and working his way, contract by contract, client by client, into the specialized cybersecurity work he did now. It paid well, but it had not always paid well, and the memory of the years when it hadn't was still close enough to touch, still present enough to make him careful with money in ways that his colleagues sometimes didn't understand. He had saved for this trip for 14 months. First class had not been the original plan. The original plan had been economy, same as always. But Ethan had found a video online. He was always finding things online, processing and cataloging the world through screens the way other kids processed it through playgrounds, of a father and son flying first class together for the first time. The way the son's face looked when he sat down in the wide seat. the way the father watched him. Ethan had not said anything about the video. He had just shown it to Marcus quietly and then gone to do his homework. Marcus had booked first class 2 weeks later. He hadn't told Ethan until the morning of the flight. He had handed him the boarding pass, the one that said first class in that specific font that somehow communicated its own significance, and watched his son read it 3 times before looking up with an expression that Marcus was going to keep in some internal pocket for the rest of his life. "Really?" Ethan had said. "Really?" Marcus had said. And Ethan, who was not generally a demonstrative child, who processed the world through observation rather than expression, had thrown his arms around his father's waist and held on for approximately 4 seconds before stepping back and composing himself with the slightly embarrassed dignity of an 8-year-old who has briefly forgotten to be measured. That moment, that specific moment, that was what the 14 months of saving had purchased. At the gate now, Ethan stood beside his father with his carry-on backpack and his glasses, the smart glasses his father had given him 6 months ago, the ones that recorded short clips automatically when they detected motion in low-light environments, the ones Ethan wore every single day because he was the kind of child for whom a recording device was less a gadget and more a natural extension of how he already moved through the world. Marcus had laughed when he gave them to him. "You're going to document everything, aren't you?" "I document everything anyway," Ethan had said, entirely seriously. "Now I'll just have proof." Marcus had found this funnier than Ethan intended it to be. Now, watching his son study the gate display with the focused attention of someone memorizing it, Marcus felt that warmth in his chest again. He squeezed Ethan's hand once. "You ready?" Ethan looked up at him with those steady, clear eyes. "I've been ready," he said. They were among the first to board. The gate agent scanned their passes. The machine beeped green twice, and she smiled at them with the particular warmth of someone who genuinely enjoys their job and said, "Welcome aboard, gentlemen. Enjoy your flight." The jetway smelled of jet fuel and recycled air and possibility. The plane was a wide-body aircraft, clean, cool, organized. First class was at the front, 4 rows of wide seats, 2 on each side, with real overhead space and actual legroom, and the kind of upholstery that communicates, quietly but firmly, that you are somewhere different now. Ethan walked down the aisle to their seats, 1A and 1B, window and middle, the very front row, and sat down with the careful, deliberate movements of someone trying very hard not to look like they're experiencing something overwhelming. He placed his backpack neatly under the seat. He put on his seatbelt. He folded his hands in his lap. Then he looked out the window at the tarmac and the morning sky, and the careful composure cracked open just slightly at the edges, and what came through was pure, unfiltered wonder. Marcus sat down beside him and said nothing. He just watched his son watch the world. The other passengers filtered in around them. The cabin filled with the sounds of boarding, rolling bags, conversations, the soft percussion of overhead bins opening and closing. A woman in a red blazer settled into 1C across the aisle. A man in a business suit took 2A behind them. And then the flight attendants came through. There were 2 of them working the first-class section initially. One was a young man named David, quick, efficient, with a genuine smile and the easy manner of someone who liked people. The other was Claire Whitmore. Ethan noticed her the way he noticed everything, steadily, without rush, building a picture from accumulated details. She was in her 40s, precise in her movements, professional in every visible way. Her uniform was immaculate. Her posture was perfect. She distributed pre-boarding water with practiced grace, making eye contact with each passenger, saying small, warm things. But Ethan noticed the pause. It was half a second. Less than half a second, maybe. The pause that happened when she reached row 1 and registered Marcus and registered Ethan and registered their seats, the first row of first class, the best seats on the plane, and something moved through her expression so quickly that anyone not paying close attention would have missed it entirely. Ethan paid close attention. She handed them their water. She smiled. She moved on. Ethan picked up his cup and held it and said nothing. His father was already on his phone, reviewing something work-related in the focused way he reviewed work things, and Ethan decided that what he had seen was probably nothing. Probably just the ambient flicker of a person whose thoughts are elsewhere. He had probably misread it. He looked back out the window. The sky was pale blue and wide. The engines were beginning their low, preliminary rumble. Everything was fine. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration played. Ethan watched every second of it with genuine attention, cataloging the location of every emergency exit. Marcus put his phone away and looked over at his son and smiled. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. Ethan considered this seriously. "Like the wheels are about to leave the ground," he said. Marcus laughed. 2 minutes later, they did. And for the first 40 minutes of the flight, everything was as close to perfect as a Tuesday morning in the air can be. If you can already feel where this story is going, hit that subscribe button right now, because what Claire Whitmore does next is something that is going to make your blood boil. We're just getting started. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Comment below. Has there ever been a moment where you could just feel something was wrong before you could prove it?
Tell us about it.
The flight had been cruising at altitude for just over 40 minutes when Claire Whitmore came back through the first-class cabin, and the temperature in Ethan Carter's chest dropped several degrees. It wasn't anything she said. Not yet. It was the way she moved. There is a specific kind of purposeful movement that people develop when they have decided something and are now proceeding toward the execution of that decision. A forward lean that isn't really a lean, a set of the shoulders that isn't quite tension. Ethan had learned to read it in teachers when they had decided someone was in trouble before they'd called them out.
He was reading it now.
She paused near the galley area at the very front of the plane. The small workstation there, fold-down counter, storage compartments, the attendant's terminal, was positioned at an angle that made it partially visible from seat 1A if you were small enough and sitting at the right angle. Ethan was both. He watched her open one of the overhead compartments, the shared storage space above the first 2 rows. She looked inside, moved something, looked again. Then she turned and said something quietly to David, the other attendant. David responded briefly. His expression suggested mild uncertainty. Claire said something else, shorter, and David's expression shifted to something more careful. Then she closed the compartment and walked back into the cabin with that purposeful non-lean, and Ethan felt the drop in temperature become a drop in altitude, the kind that presses against your ears. She stopped at row 1. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was exactly the right volume. Friendly. Professional. Every external setting correct. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Sir, are you familiar with the storage compartment directly above your seats?" Marcus looked up from the book he'd been reading. "I put my bag up there when we boarded, yes." "I see. And you haven't taken anything out since then?" A pause. The kind that asks a question even when the spoken words are technically neutral. "No," Marcus said. "Should I have?" "We're just doing a routine check," she said smoothly. "Thank you." She moved to 1C and asked the woman in the red blazer the same question. Then she moved to 2A and asked the man in the business suit. Standard. Methodical. Identical tone for each. But Ethan had been watching her face, not her performance. And her face, for just a fraction of a second between leaving row 1 and reaching row 1C, had done something that the performance didn't account for. Satisfaction. Not relief that the check was proceeding normally. Satisfaction. The specific micro-expression of someone who has already decided on the answer and is now constructing the supporting structure around it. Marcus had gone back to his book. Ethan had not gone back to anything. He sat in seat 1B and looked at his hands in his lap and thought very carefully. He thought about what he had seen when they boarded. The pause in her expression. He thought about what he had just seen from his window seat angle, her at the compartment, moving something. He thought about what his father had taught him. Pay attention before you speak. Make sure you have the whole picture. Because when you speak, the words matter, and they have to be right. He didn't have the whole picture yet. He adjusted his glasses. The motion-activated recording function had been running since the cabin lights dimmed. It kicked in automatically in lower light conditions, a feature his father had shown him, but that Ethan had never specifically deployed on purpose. It was just on. The way it was always just on when the conditions triggered it. He settled back into his seat and kept watching. 20 minutes passed. The drink cart came through. Ethan had apple juice. His father had coffee. The cabin settled back into its comfortable in-flight rhythm, the gentle vibration of the engines, the muffled conversations, the soft sounds of a pressurized space full of people going somewhere. And then Claire came back. This time, she brought the other attendant with her. Not David. A woman, 40-something, with the expression of someone who has been told a version of a story and is not entirely sure it's the complete version but is proceeding because that is what the situation requires. They stopped at row 1. Sir. Claire's voice had changed. Not dramatically. But the professional warmth had been pulled back, like a curtain being drawn, and what was underneath it was something cooler and more direct. I need to inform you that a valuable item belonging to one of our other first-class passengers has gone missing from the shared overhead compartment above rows 1 and 2. Marcus closed his book completely this time. He put it face down on his tray table. He looked at Claire Whitmore with the kind of look that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. Okay, he said carefully. What item? An envelope containing cash. It was reported to me by the passenger in 2C, who stored it in the compartment before takeoff. And you're telling me this because you are the first passenger to access that compartment. I put my bag up there when I boarded, Marcus said. Before we took off. Everyone boards at different times. Half the cabin put things in that compartment. The passenger in 2C is certain it was there at boarding. They checked specifically. That's not. Marcus stopped. Breathed. The way he always breathed when he needed a moment. In through the nose, out slow, the physical discipline of a man who had learned the hard way that reacting instead of responding was a luxury he could not afford. That doesn't constitute evidence that I took anything. No one is making an accusation, Claire said, in a tone that was making exactly that accusation. Then, what is this conversation? I'm asking for your cooperation in resolving this situation. My cooperation, Marcus said. What does that look like? It would be helpful if you'd allow us to check your bag. The cabin around them had done that thing again, that collective stillness that isn't silence but is louder than silence. People were not watching directly. They were watching sideways, the way people watch things in confined spaces when they want to see without being seen seeing. Ethan was watching directly. He was watching his father, who was holding himself with the kind of stillness that Ethan recognized as the most controlled version of a very complicated emotion. He was watching Claire, whose expression had settled into the professional blankness of someone who has positioned themselves in a way they are confident about. And he was watching the other attendant, who was standing slightly behind Claire with the slightly unfocused expression of someone who is present in body, but not entirely in conviction. You can check my bag, Marcus said finally. There is nothing in my bag that belongs to anyone else, and I want that to be very clear before you open it. Of course, Claire said. She reached up and opened the overhead compartment. Marcus's carry-on was a clean black rolling bag, compact and organized the way Marcus organized everything. Claire lifted it down and set it on the empty seat beside the aisle. May I? She asked. Go ahead, Marcus said. She unzipped it. She went through it. Folded clothes, toiletries bag, charging cables, a book, a folder of documents. She went through every pocket. She looked in every compartment. She found nothing. She zipped the bag back up. There was a moment, a specific moment that Ethan felt in his actual body, where the situation could have ended there. Where Claire Whitmore could have said something reasonable, apologized for the disruption, and moved on. Where the story becomes a minor unpleasantness rather than what it became. She didn't take that moment. I'd also like to check your personal items, she said. Looking at Marcus's jacket, folded on the armrest. Looking at the backpack under the seat. Something moved through Marcus's expression. Something that lived in the very bottom register of his face, the layer beneath the controlled surface. Something that had a name, but that he would not say on this airplane. That's my son's backpack, he said quietly. He's 8 years old. Sir, I understand this is uncomfortable. Do not check my son's backpack, Marcus said. And his voice was still controlled, still measured. But there was something in it now that was made of iron. He is 8 years old, and he has done nothing, and you will not go through his belongings. If you're refusing to cooperate, I have cooperated. Completely. You searched my bag. You found nothing. This conversation should be over. Claire straightened. Her hands went to their clasped position in front of her. And she said, in the carrying voice of someone who wants the cabin to hear, The fact that you're being defensive about your son's bag is concerning to me. Ethan felt the air in the cabin change, and he felt something change inside himself. Something that had been watching and processing and waiting clicked over into something different. Not anger. Ethan Carter was not, at 8 years old, a child given to anger.
But certainty.
A clean, cold, absolute certainty about what was happening and what needed to happen next. He thought about his father on late nights at the kitchen table, working through problems with the patient focus of a man who believed that every problem had a solution if you approached it correctly. He thought about what his father had said once, driving home from a situation at school that had not gone fairly. When someone tries to use your silence against you, Ethan, your silence is not your friend anymore. The truth is your friend. Find it and stand behind it. He reached up and touched the arm of his glasses. He said quietly, "Dad." Marcus looked at him. In Marcus Carter's eyes in that moment was a very complicated collection of things, protectiveness, and the specific anguish of a parent watching their child encounter something they were hoping to shield them from for a little while longer, and something else. Something that looked, underneath everything, almost like faith. "I know," Marcus said softly. But Ethan was already thinking about what he'd seen from seat 1A. The angle, the compartment, her hands moving something. His mind had been turning it over quietly for the last 30 minutes, building the picture piece by piece the way his father had taught him, and now the picture was assembled. He looked at Claire Whitmore, and he said, very calmly, "I saw you at the compartment." The cabin went absolutely still. Claire turned to look at him. This child, this 8-year-old in his seat with his hands folded and his glasses, and his expression of complete, unrattled calm. Looking at her the way people almost never look at a person who is used to controlling a room, directly, without aggression, without performance. Just seeing her.
"Excuse me," she said.
"Before you came to ask my dad about the envelope," Ethan said. "I saw you at the compartment. You opened it. You moved something. A beat." "That's not," she stopped. Recalibrated.
Put the smile back on.
"Sweetheart, I was doing a routine check." "You moved something," Ethan said. "I was sitting right here. I had a clear angle. I watched you." Children sometimes misinterpret. "I don't misinterpret things," Ethan said. "Not with attitude. Simply as a statement of fact. And my glasses were recording." Subscribe right now because when they play back that footage, what they find in that recording is something no one on that plane was ready for. Hit subscribe and ring the bell. You cannot miss what comes next. Tell us in the comments, the moment Ethan said, "I saw you at the compartment." What were you feeling? Drop it below. The words hung in the pressurized air of the first-class cabin like something that had been dropped from a very great height. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. Claire Whitmore's expression went through several rapid changes that her professional training was not quite fast enough to manage.
Surprise.
Reassessment. The beginning of dismissal. And then underneath all of it, so brief, so quickly buried, that only someone who had been watching very carefully for exactly this kind of thing would have caught it. Something that looked like the first cold edge of fear. "Sweetheart," she said, and the word was doing a lot of work. "A child's toy glasses don't." "They're not a toy," Marcus said. And his voice had changed. The iron was still there, but it was warmer now, galvanized by something. "They're a wearable recording device. They record short clips automatically in low-light conditions. He's been wearing them since we boarded." The other attendant, the one who had been standing slightly behind Claire with the uncertain expression, shifted her weight. A small movement, but Ethan noticed it. She was recalibrating something. T. Morrison, the lead flight attendant, appeared at the front of the cabin. A tall man in his 50s with the bearing of someone who has spent 30 years managing crises at altitude and developed a permanent, baseline calm as a result. He had been in the galley. He had heard enough. "What's the situation?" he asked, in a voice that was professionally neutral but carried authority the way certain voices simply do, not by being loud but by being absolutely certain of their own weight. Claire turned to him immediately. "We have a theft incident." "We have an accusation," Marcus said, at exactly the same time. Morrison looked at both of them. Then he looked at the 8-year-old sitting perfectly still in 1B, who was watching this entire exchange with the focused attention of someone taking a very important exam. "Young man," he said to Ethan, "what did you say about a recording?" Ethan reached up and touched the left temple of his glasses. "They record automatically. I've been wearing them since we boarded."
He paused.
"I saw her open the compartment before she came to accuse my dad. She moved something. I want to show you." Morrison was quiet for a moment. A thoughtful quiet. The kind that is doing real work. "Can you pull up the footage?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Ethan unzipped the front pocket of his backpack. The backpack that Claire Whitmore had wanted to search. The backpack belonging to the 8-year-old who had done nothing, and retrieved a short cable. He connected it to the port on the glasses temple and to his phone. The footage app opened automatically, queued to the most recent clips. He held the phone out to T. Morrison. And in the first-class cabin of Flight 447, every person who could lean forward leaned forward. The footage was cleaner than anyone expected. The smart glasses recorded at a resolution that was higher than a casual observer would assume from the slim, understated frame. The angle was low, seat height looking slightly upward, which turned out to matter enormously. Because what you could see from seat height at that specific angle that you could not see from standing height was the interior of the overhead compartment when it was opened. The clip was 47 seconds long. It showed the galley area and the front of the compartment from Ethan's seated perspective. It showed Claire approaching the compartment alone, approximately 18 minutes into the flight. It showed her opening it. And it showed, with undeniable, unambiguous clarity, her hand going into the compartment, retrieving something, a dark envelope, visible for a clear 2 seconds, and then her body shifting, a pocket of her service apron opening, and the envelope disappearing. Then it showed her closing the compartment. Then it showed her turning away. Then it showed her walking back into the main cabin. 47 seconds. No ambiguity. No alternative explanation. The kind of footage that doesn't require commentary, because it is its own commentary. T. Morrison watched it twice. His face, across both viewings, became progressively and completely still. He handed the phone back to Ethan carefully, the way you handle something important. He straightened. He looked at Claire Whitmore. And the thing that happened to Claire Whitmore's face in that moment was something that Ethan would remember for a very long time. Not with satisfaction, he was not built for that kind of satisfaction, but with the particular clarity of someone watching a structure collapse. Every layer coming down in sequence. The professional warmth, the controlled authority, the certainty, the calculation, coming down one after another like floors of a building, until what was left was just a person standing in an airplane aisle with nowhere left to hide. "Claire," T. Morrison said. His voice was very quiet. "Do you want to tell me what I just watched?" The angle is, you can't tell from that angle what." "The envelope is visible for 2 seconds," he said. Still quiet. Still even. "Your face is visible for 47. I was securing loose items. In your apron pocket."
Silence.
"That is a passenger's personal property," T. Morrison said. "I need you to return it. Right now." Another silence. Longer. The cabin not breathing. And then Claire Whitmore's hand moved to her apron pocket. She retrieved the envelope. She put it on the tray table beside row 2 without looking at anyone. The cabin, every person in it, exhaled. Marcus Carter sat very still for a moment. He looked at the envelope. On the tray table. He looked at his son. He looked at T. Morrison. And then he looked at Claire Whitmore with an expression that had moved completely past anger into something quieter and more vast, the expression of a man who has just watched a very specific kind of injustice try to execute itself on him and his child and has watched it fail, and who is sitting with the full complicated weight of both of those things simultaneously. "She was going to let them remove us from the plane," he said. To T. Morrison. Quietly. "She was going to let them believe I stole from another passenger. With my son sitting right there." T. Morrison held his gaze. "I understand," he said. And the simplicity of those 2 words, the weight behind them, the acknowledgement that they carried, was the closest thing to dignity that the situation had left to offer. Claire was not looking at anyone. She was looking at the floor, at a specific point on the carpet that had become suddenly very important to her. "I'm going to need you to come with me," T. Morrison said to her. Not harshly. Simply. With the finality of a door closing. She went. The cabin watched her walk toward the rear of the plane. The other attendant, who had been standing through all of it with the expression of someone who has just watched something they half suspected was possible and hoped wasn't, moved quickly to return the envelope to its owner in 2C. A middle-aged woman in a gray coat who had said nothing through the entire confrontation and who now accepted her property back with shaking hands and looked at Marcus Carter with an expression that was trying to carry an apology too large for a look. Marcus nodded at her.
Once. Not warmly.
But not unkindly either. T. Morrison returned from the rear of the plane several minutes later and crouched in the aisle beside row 1 so that he was at eye level with both Marcus and Ethan. He spoke quietly and directly, the way people speak when they want to be sure they are heard. I have removed her from service for this flight. She will not return to this cabin. Upon landing, this will be reported immediately to airline operations and to the relevant authorities. The recording your son captured is... He paused, choosing his words with care. It is significant. We will need to preserve it as part of the formal report. Do I have your permission to copy it? You do, Marcus said. T. Morrison looked at Ethan. Young man. That was... He stopped again. Started again. You did something very important today. The fact that you paid attention and that you had the presence of mind to know what that footage meant, that matters. Do you understand? Ethan looked at him steadily. My dad taught me that the truth needs a place to land, he said. I was just trying to give it one. T. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Your dad taught you well, he said. He stood and moved back up the aisle. The cabin returned, slowly, to the surface appearance of a flight proceeding normally. Drinks were refilled. The clouds moved outside the windows. The engines maintained their steady, impartial hum. But something had changed in the air. The way something changes when people who have witnessed something together must now sit with each other in the knowledge of what they've witnessed. Several passengers made small gestures in Marcus's direction, a nod, a brief look of acknowledgement that carried more than it seemed to. The woman in the red blazer leaned across the aisle and said, simply and quietly, I'm sorry that happened to you. The man in the business suit had his phone out and was reviewing footage of his own. He had recorded portions of the confrontation from row 2. Marcus thanked them. He was composed. He was the most composed person in the cabin and had been throughout, which was its own kind of statement. He looked at Ethan. His son was looking out the window with that particular focused expression, cataloging the clouds, reading the sky, filing the world away in the careful internal archive where Ethan kept everything.
Calm.
Present. Processing in that deep, quiet way he processed things. Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan looked up. You okay? Marcus asked. Ethan thought about it. Genuinely considered the question the way he considered all questions, fully, without rushing toward an answer.
Yeah, he said.
Then, were you scared? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honest the way he was always honest with his son. Yes, he said. But not for me. Ethan nodded. He understood. He turned back to the window. I wasn't scared, he said. Not boastfully. Just as information. I know, Marcus said. Because we had the truth. Marcus looked at his son for a long moment. At the profile of this 8-year-old who watched the world with the patient attention of someone who has decided that seeing clearly is more important than seeing comfortably. Who had sat in a seat and paid attention when everyone else was performing normalcy. Who had kept his voice steady and his eyes clear in the moment that mattered. Yeah, Marcus said softly. We did. The clouds moved outside. The plane flew on. And somewhere in the rear of the aircraft, in whatever space airline procedure had arranged for her, Claire Whitmore was sitting with the specific, irreversible weight of what happens when you assume that no one is watching. Subscribe right now, because what happens when this plane lands and that footage hits the internet is something that the airline was absolutely not prepared for. The next part of the story gets even bigger.
Hit subscribe.
When T. Morrison watched that footage and told her to return the envelope, what were you feeling in that moment? Tell us exactly in the comments. The plane landed at LAX at 2:14 in the afternoon, Pacific time. By 2:47, while Marcus and Ethan were still in the terminal waiting for their luggage, the man from row 2, the one in the business suit who had been recording on his phone, had posted his footage online. His caption was 8 words. This boy just saved an innocent man.
Watch.
He had 900 followers. By 3:15, the post had been shared 4,000 times. By 5 o'clock, it had been shared 40,000 times, and the 8-word caption had been quoted, screenshotted, and reproduced in comment sections across multiple platforms. By 9 p.m. Pacific, it was everywhere. The footage from the man in 2B was clear enough. It showed the confrontation, showed Claire's controlled aggression, showed Marcus's measured responses, showed Ethan speaking. But what made the post spread at the speed it spread was what the man had added in a follow-up comment 3 hours after the original post. He had written, the boy was wearing smart glasses that caught everything, including the actual theft. I watched them play back the footage on the plane. She took the envelope herself. She was going to blame the father and son and have them removed. The child is 8 years old. That follow-up comment was shared more than the original post. By midnight, the clip was on the national news. By morning, it was everywhere. Marcus learned about the scale of it from his sister, who called him at 6:47 a.m. Los Angeles time while he was making coffee in the hotel room with Ethan still asleep in the other bed. You're on the news, his sister said, without preamble. Good morning to you too, Marcus said. Marcus, you are on the national news. There is a Chiron. There is a photograph of Ethan. Are you watching this? He turned on the television. The photograph they were using was from Ethan's school ID. He had no idea how they'd found it, but the internet finds things, and it showed his son in his glasses looking at the camera with that expression, that specific expression of a child who is taking something seriously. Above it, the Chiron read, 8-year-old S smart glasses expose flight attendant in theft and racial bias incident. Father and son targeted in first-class cabin. Marcus stood in the hotel room in his bare feet with his coffee in his hand and looked at his son's face on a national news broadcast and felt several things at once that were too large and too complicated to sort through quickly. He felt pride. The specific, overwhelming, almost physically painful pride of a parent watching their child do something that reveals the full depth of who they are. He felt grief. The grief that comes from knowing your child has encountered something they should not have had to encounter, has been asked to be brave in a situation they should never have been placed in. He felt something he didn't immediately have a name for that was located somewhere between exhaustion and relief and the weight of a specific kind of recognition. And he felt, quietly, certainly gratitude. For a pair of glasses. For the particular kind of child his son was. For the fact that the truth had, this time, had somewhere to land. Ethan woke up at 7:30 and came padding out of the bedroom in his socks and found his father sitting on the edge of the hotel couch, with a television on. He stopped in the doorway and looked at the screen. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. On the screen, a morning news anchor was describing the incident in the practiced, slightly breathless tone of a story that combines outrage with human interest. They were showing portions of the row. 2 man's footage. They were saying Ethan's name. They were saying Marcus's name. They were saying Claire Whitmore's name too. Is that about us? Ethan asked. Yes, Marcus said. Ethan came and sat beside his father on the edge of the couch. He watched the screen for another moment. Are we in trouble? He asked. Marcus looked at him.
No.
The opposite. Ethan absorbed this. She's in trouble. Yes. A pause. Is she going to be okay? Marcus studied his son's face. The question was genuine. 8 years old, and his first instinct, watching the person who had tried to destroy his father's reputation on a plane full of witnesses, was to ask if she was going to be okay. That's not really our responsibility to figure out, Marcus said carefully. But she's going to have to deal with what she did. That's how it should be. Ethan nodded slowly. He kept looking at the screen. People are angry, he said. Yes. Are you angry? Marcus was quiet for a moment. He owed his son the honest answer. I was, he said. On the plane. I was very angry. But I couldn't show it, because showing it would have become the story. That's a specific kind of thing that happens.
He paused.
You understand what I mean? You would have been the problem, Ethan said. Quietly. Without bitterness. Just understanding. Yes. Ethan was quiet for a moment. That's not fair, he said. No, Marcus agreed. It's not. They sat together on the edge of the couch in the Los Angeles hotel room, father and son, watching the world process what had happened to them on an airplane the day before. The news cycle moving at its characteristic breathless pace. The comments multiplying. The shares compounding. The internet doing the thing the internet does, assembling itself into a collective witness after the fact, retroactively filling the seats of a first-class cabin that most of them had never been in. The airline issued a formal statement at 9 a.m. Pacific. It was longer than first statements usually are, which meant their legal team had been up all night. It confirmed that the employee had been suspended pending a full investigation. It confirmed that the incident was being reviewed comprehensively. It expressed, in language that was exquisitely careful and arrived approximately 19 hours after it should have, deep regret for the experience of the affected passengers. It did not mention Claire Whitmore by name. It did not need to. The internet had taken care of that approximately 16 hours earlier. By noon, 3 other passengers, 2 from first class, 1 from business class on a different flight, had come forward independently with accounts of prior interactions with Claire Whitmore that described variations on the same pattern. Authority wielded selectively. Polished professionalism that became something else in specific circumstances. The accumulation of specific circumstances pointing in a specific direction. The airline, by the afternoon, had confirmed that its investigation had expanded to a comprehensive review of complaint records. Marcus, when he read this, said nothing out loud. He read it standing at the hotel window looking out at the Los Angeles skyline, and he was quiet for a long time, and then he called his mother, who was in Atlanta, and talked to her for 22 minutes about things that had nothing to do with the news. Ethan, meanwhile, was at the hotel's small pool with his glasses on and his feet in the water and his phone in his lap, watching a video about how jet engines work because they were in Los Angeles, and he wanted to understand the thing that had brought them there before he did anything else. He was 8 years old. He was in California for the first time. The sky was enormous and a completely different color than Atlanta. His father came and sat beside him at the pool and put his feet in the water too, and they sat there together in the California afternoon for a while, not talking, which was one of the things they were best at together. Eventually Ethan said, "Can we go see the ocean?" "That was always the plan," Marcus said. "Good," Ethan said, and put his phone away,
and looked at the sky.
We are almost at the end of the story, and what Marcus says to Ethan at the ocean is something you need to hear. Subscribe right now so you never miss a story that moves you like this one. When Ethan asked, "Is she going to be okay?" What did that question make you feel about this 8-year-old? Tell us in the comments. 6 days after the flight, Leonard Simmons, the man from row 2 in the business suit, the one who had posted the original footage, received an email. It was from Marcus Carter. It was 3 paragraphs long. It said in the first paragraph that Marcus wanted him to know the footage he had captured and posted had contributed materially to the formal investigation that was now underway. That it had given additional witnesses a reason to come forward. That it had made it harder for the incident to be absorbed quietly into the space where these things usually go. The second paragraph said that Ethan had wanted him to know specifically that watching someone in the cabin choose to pay attention, to reach for a phone and record, to make themselves a witness on purpose, had meant something to him. That it confirmed something he believed, which was that the decision to notice things, to document things, to refuse to look away, was not a small decision. It was one of the most important decisions a person could make. The third paragraph was short. It said, "My son is 8 years old, and he understood, before this trip, that the world requires witnesses. You were one of them. Thank you." Leonard Simmons read that email 3 times, and then called his wife into the room and read it to her, and they sat with it together for a few minutes. He had not expected to be part of a story. He had just been a man on a plane who saw something happening and reached for his phone. He wrote back the same evening. He told Marcus that he was glad he had reached for the phone. He told him that he had spent the flight regretting that he had not stood up sooner, had not said something louder, had waited too long to make himself useful. He told him that watching Ethan, this 8-year-old with his calm voice and his steady hands, had changed something in his thinking about what courage looks like in practice. About how it doesn't always announce itself. About how sometimes the most powerful thing in the room is a child who has been taught to pay attention. He told him to tell Ethan thank you. Marcus read the email at the kitchen table back in Atlanta, 3 days after returning from Los Angeles. Ethan was doing homework at the other end of the table. The school had gotten wind of what had happened. The teachers, the principal, had all seen the news, and there had been a week of careful attention and conversations and the slight disorientation that comes from suddenly existing in a story that other people are telling about you. Ethan had handled it the way he handled most things, by continuing to pay attention to the things that seemed important and declining to perform for the things that didn't. He had told his teacher, when she asked him how he felt about what had happened, that he felt like things had worked out the way they were supposed to, not because they always did, but because this time someone had been there to make sure they could. His teacher had written that down. Marcus slid his phone across the table so Ethan could read the email. Ethan read it. His face did that thing, the careful internal processing thing, the cataloging. Then he looked up.
He says thank you, Marcus said.
I know, Ethan said. I read it. How do you feel about that?
Ethan thought about it.
I feel like the right things happened, he said. Not because I'm a hero. I'm not a hero. I paid attention. And I was ready. He paused. Anyone could do that. Could they?
Marcus said.
Another pause. Longer. They could learn to, Ethan said. Marcus looked at his son for a long moment. This 8-year-old who had sat in a first-class seat on an airplane and watched a woman try to dismantle his father's dignity in front of a cabin full of people, and had been afraid not at all, and had been angry not at all, and had simply been clear, had simply been present, had simply been, in the most complete and most quiet way, prepared. He thought about the night he had decided to book first class. The specific image of Ethan watching that video of the father and son, the way his face had been so carefully neutral, the way he had handed the phone over without saying anything, letting the image speak for itself. He thought about everything that flight had been supposed to be, the promise it was meant to keep, the particular gift of a wide seat and a real glass and the wheels leaving the ground for the first time in first class. He thought it was all of that, despite everything, because of everything. It had been exactly that and more. It had been the trip where his son had shown him who he was, fully and without performance, in the exact kind of moment that reveals a person completely. He thought, I did something right. Not perfectly. Not without fear or difficulty or the weight of everything that the situation had cost in real time. But something essentially, importantly right. He had taught his son to pay attention. He had taught his son that the truth needs a place to land and that being that place is not heroism. It is simply what it looks like to be present, to be prepared, to decide that what happens in front of you matters enough to witness clearly. He had taught his son that calm is not surrender. And his son had learned it so completely that he had deployed it, without Marcus even knowing, at 32,000 feet, in a sealed tube with nowhere to go, in exactly the moment where it mattered most. That night Marcus stood in the doorway of Ethan's room after bedtime, the way he did sometimes, just to check. Ethan was asleep with a specific tidiness of a child who has made his bed properly and then gotten into it. His glasses were on the nightstand beside him. The app was closed. The indicator light was dark. Just waiting. Marcus stood there for a moment. He thought about the first morning after the flight. Waking up in the hotel room. His son's face on the news. The cheerin'. He thought about how the world had looked at Ethan, at this child, this specific child, and had briefly understood something about what it looks like when a person of any size, any age, any background decides to be clear-eyed and prepared in a world that often finds it easier not to be. He thought, this is the inheritance worth passing on. Not the anger. Not the wariness. Not the specific, familiar weight that he carried and that Ethan would eventually carry, the weight that came with the particular life they were living in the particular country they were living in. That weight was real, and he would not pretend otherwise to his son. But alongside it, woven through it, the other thing, the thing that said, you can pay attention. You can be prepared. You can make yourself the place where the truth lands. You can stand in an airplane aisle at 32,000 feet with nothing but clear eyes and a recording device and the composure your mother and I spent 8 years teaching you, and you can be enough. You can be more than enough. You can change what happens. You can be the thing that changes what happens. He turned off the hallway light. He went to bed. And in the morning, Ethan Carter woke up and put on his glasses and went to school. The indicator light blinked once, soft and steady, in the morning light of an ordinary day. Ready? Because the world does not stop requiring witnesses just because the story has moved on. And there is always another moment waiting. And somewhere in that moment, always, is a child who has decided to pay attention. And somewhere in that child is the truth, patient and quiet, waiting for the right place to land. And when it finds one, when it finds a person who has been steady enough, clear enough, prepared enough to receive it, there is nothing on earth that can stop it. Not a polished smile, not a uniform, not authority arranged like furniture in a room where it doesn't belong, not 32,000 feet between you and the ground. Nothing. She had thought no one was watching, but someone was. He was 8 years old. He was wearing glasses, and the truth had found exactly the place it needed. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if Marcus and Ethan made you feel something real today, please subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. These stories only reach the people who need them when you carry them forward.
Hit subscribe.
Hit share. And come back for the next one. Final question. What does Ethan's story make you want to do differently in your own life, your own moments, your own ordinary days? We read every single comment. Tell us.
End.